This afternoon, we're talking about what you really need to know before you launch a podcast. So you want to launch a podcast. The podcasting is still incredibly popular. So a little bit of housekeeping. We're here for an hour, so we will run until 4 p.m. Queensland time. If anyone's got any burning questions, I'm happy to hang around for a little bit afterwards and make sure. Now, I have got a downloadable for you that you are welcome to grab at the end of the session or in the recording. So I'll pop a little note into the recording where you can pop your name and email in and grab the downloadable, and I'll show you what that looks like towards the end. Before we kick off, this is part of Entrepreneur Fest week. We have had a ton of workshops and we're kind of coming to the pointy end of the week, and it's just been lovely to see everybody turn up from around Australia. We've had everything from YouTube to legal to writing a sales page to SEO to social media. There's just been, a lot of different content with a lot of great presenters. And it's been a pleasure to be involved with Entrepreneur Fest. So I am one of the entrepreneur facilitators in Queensland. I'm based in Queensland, and my area is Ipswich, Lockyer Valley, half of Somerset and half of Scenic Rim. So if you know Queensland, that is where I am based. Now, just a shout out to an acknowledgement of country and a recognition of elders past, present and emerging. And in the opening of Entrepreneur Fest week, I think Taz did a lovely job of kind of saying that, Australia for tens of thousands of years has really been a place of sharing stories, of innovation and of getting together and learning and swapping knowledge. And really that taps into the spirit of Entrepreneur Fest and what we're doing. Today, I'm coming to you from the lands of the Jagera people in Toowoomba in Queensland. So I'm a little away from my region today, but I'm from Bundjalung country in northern New South Wales. If you would like to pop into the chat box where you're from, I always love to hear where, the names of the countries and the nations around Australia. All right, let's kick off with a few stats around podcasting so you can just kind of check in and check your own understanding where podcasting sits on the hierarchy of digital marketing now. So there are over 2 million podcasts and over 48 million episodes. 87% of the Australian population is now familiar with the term podcasting. So we are almost at peak podcast, I would kind of suggest. G'day, Debbie. Lovely to see you on another webinar. 30% of the Australian population has now listened to a podcast. And I'm interested to know with the people in the room today, just pop a yes if you have listened to podcasts or if you're a regular podcast listener. And if you'd like to pop in what your favorite show is at the moment, what are you binging on? What are you listening to in podcasts? I'd love to hear that. So Debbie's a yes. I know Peter's a yes. Excellent. And Dennis, probably, there we go. Dennis is as well. Excellent. 81% of podcast listening is done at home. So I buck the trend there. I listen to my podcasts in the car or while I'm commuting, and 45% of us listen to them in a vehicle, 18% on public transport. I refer to that as communication. So we often look for something to educate ourselves while we're commuting. So I kind of coined the phrase communication. And podcast listeners listen to an average of six different shows per week. So that feels about right for me. I don't know whether you listen to that many or not. Again, pop a note in the chat. Love to hear it. And 85% of listeners listen to their podcasts on a mobile device. And I know I certainly do. So that rings true for me. One of the other things that aren't mentioned in the stats, and you can all let me know whether this is you as well, as most real podcast listeners will listen to their podcast on probably 1.5 or 2 speed as well. Can't stay. Could you send me a link to the recording, please? Yep, Kristen, it'll definitely be coming out. Probably take a few days because we've had a bucket load of webinars over the week, but definitely you will get a copy of the recording. All right, so a little bit about me and why I am here running this session on podcasting. So my name is Tracy Sheen. I'm known as the Digital Guide. I'm the author of The End of Technophobia, which was Australia's Business Book of the Year last year, just handed off the crown 2 nights ago to a lady by the name of Jessica Irvine with Money with Jess. So congratulations to Jessica. I'm a judge for the Australian Podcast Awards and have been since their inception. So this was my 8th year of judging. So I launched Australia's first panel style podcast called Not Another Business Show. And it went a little bit global, a little bit viral. And I was getting people listening in from Azerbaijan and all kinds of crazy, the Maldives, kind of crazy places around the map. And the only way that I knew about Azerbaijan at the time is because I'm a Formula One fan. So it was on the calendar of where the races were. And I'm like, why is someone listening to a little old podcast about small business from Australia? But there you go. That's one of the nice things that can happen when you're a podcaster. So I've been involved in podcasting for over 10 years now, and I have a radio background. So I worked in radio for a while as on air and also as a copywriter. So I really have a love of that medium of audio, and podcasting just really fills a beautiful niche for me. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity for entrepreneurs to really claim their space. These days, I am a media commentator, so I do a lot of work with Koshi on Koshi's Business Builders. I am a certified practicing marketer with the Australian Marketing Institute, which is our highest body in Australia, and I'm the only one in Australia to have been certified without going through university. So all of my work was done on the ground, getting my hands dirty. So really, really nice way to do it there. I'm the founder of the Small Business Tech Club, and most of my work is done like this. A lot of webinars, a lot of workshops, a lot of educational stuff. I love training and assisting entrepreneurs to use and leverage all kinds of technology in their business. So Dennis just said a record podcast of senior citizens in the Port Macquarie area. Oh, awesome. So excellent. Okay, that's a really nice idea. Excellent. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is, so you're thinking about launching a podcast, there's a bunch of stuff that you really need to consider before you even start, because as a judge for the Podcast Awards, I can tell you the things that we judge on and the things that we listen for is audio quality, is the flow of the episode. So is there a cohesion to the episode? Is it cohesion to the season? Is there a reason for the podcast to be out? Is it doing something that isn't being filled by another medium? And is it in the spirit of podcasting? So there's some of the things that we judge on when we're listening to the Australian Podcast Awards. So I know when I'm working with clients to help them develop their own podcasts, we really start right back at the foundational level before we even, get in front of a microphone and do the juicy stuff. So really my first question to you is, what's your strategy? Why do you want a podcast? Is it to build a community? And it sounds like that's Dennis's plan there with recording the seniors around the Port Macquarie region. Is it to raise your profile? Is it to show your credibility within your industry? Is it because you're passionate about something and you just want to chat about it? That's perfectly fine and a great reason to use the medium of podcasting. Is it to build a network? When I had Not Another Business Show, it was amazing the people that I could reach out to, that there was no way I was ever going to get them to join a podcast or join me in a conversation if I didn't have a podcast, if they couldn't see a way for or a reason to chat with me. But to be able to say to them, hey, I've got this show and it's getting a couple of thousand downloads every episode and we've got listeners around the globe, people say yes. Okay, so it's a really lovely way to build your credibility, build your network, etc. So Debbie's looking to educate business owners as well. Fantastic. Or do you want to sell stuff? Let's face it, we're entrepreneurs, we're in business. At the end of the day, if we're not selling stuff, we don't have a business. So what is your reason for wanting to create your own podcast? That's the place to start. That's the place that will build everything that you begin to think of off the back of that very simple question. Once you know your reason for the podcast, everything else begins to fall into place. So the next question is, who is your ideal listener? So often as entrepreneurs and as business owners, we understand the concept of having an ideal customer. We may have even gone down the process of developing an avatar or of understanding who our client, who our market is. But here's the thing with podcasting, our ideal listener can often be a little bit different to our ideal client. So we really need to be thinking about, who do we want to be reaching? Why do we want to be reaching them? What's the intention? Where are they hanging out? So a similar kind of process that we would take through building that ideal client or coming up with that avatar is the same process that we need to be thinking of around building and identifying our ideal listener. When we know who that is, it gives us the structure and the tonality for our podcast. We know if we're speaking to people that all have PhDs or master's degrees in a particular area, the show might be a little bit more academic, a little bit more dry. Maybe it's content driven. But if we're speaking to other entrepreneurs and we're adding value, perhaps it's more conversational, it's more case study, story driven. It's letting people behind the scenes. So it's understanding who do we want to listen to the show that helps us to figure out the tonality, who our guests would be, what we would be talking about, etc. And Joy's saying a little bit of all of those of the reason for starting the podcast. So that's fantastic. And what type of show do you want to create? So a podcast is not a podcast is not a podcast. If you want to be a podcaster, listen to podcasts and you'll see very quickly that they break in to a variety of different topics. You've got the single person show, which is often a thought leadership piece where it's one person straight down a mic delivering information. So I'm listening to one at the moment called A Maths Life, I think it is, which is hosted by Adam Spencer. Let's try and find what it's actually called to give you an idea, because it's good to kind of go through and listen to a few different styles to help you identify which is the one that you are interested in creating for yourself. Another one, Just One Thing, Michael Mosley, that's him just delivering content as the expert, as the thought leadership piece. So that's one style of show. You've got the interview style, which is Conversations with Richard Fidler, which is still Australia's most downloaded podcast, or Jay Shetty, On Purpose. So there's a lot of those interview style shows where it's, Debbie and I sitting down having a conversation about a thing. They're typically less structured, they're typically less edited, and they're a little bit more free flowing in how the conversation happens. Think about if you were eavesdropping at a cafe or at a pub, it might be that style of show. And then you've got things like the panel style shows. Now, I listen to, as I said at the start, a show on Formula One, and that is a couple of ex-drivers and a couple of journalists, and they debate or talk about the qualifying and then the race at the end of every episode, and they pull the race apart and talk about the different team dynamics and things that were going on. But there's a lot of bouncing backwards and forwards, and it takes the listener a while to develop that understanding of the voices switching. Oh, that's Debbie now. Oh, that's Dennis. Oh, that's Jason. Oh, that's Joy. We need a while to build up that memory bank of who those voices change are. So when we're listening, we can flow through the episode smoothly. So think about, again, with the ideal listener in mind and the type of show that you want to create, what would be the best style of show for you to create to build that audience, to build your credibility, to build your authority, to sell more stuff, to reach more people, to do that type of thing. When I had the panel style, Not Another Business Show, that was 3 to 5 different business owners each week. And that was heavily curated, so heavily edited, that I would have to pull different bits together and then weave the storyline together. So I would say, and in the conversation, Debbie had this to say, and then I would cut to a piece of what Debbie had to say. Because we're thinking about, again, our listeners' experience of the switching of the conversation from one person to another and their ability to follow through. Much like when we listen to audiobooks, the narrator will change voices, or there's a difference in the cast reading the different bits of the show. Does that make sense? Any questions on the different styles of podcasts or who you might be creating things for at the moment? The next thing is around what problems are you solving? So what is the show trying to achieve? We're talking about understanding the purpose of the podcast. We're talking about understanding our audience. We're talking about knowing the style of show and the tonality that we want to use. But what about, again, what's the problem? Because if we aren't solving an issue for our audience, why am I tuning in? Remember right back at the start, there's over 2 million shows. There's over 48 million episodes out there now. There's well over several billion downloads. What's going to keep me coming back to your show? What am I getting that I'm not getting from watching television, from reading an article, from watching a video? What am I getting from your show? What problem are you solving for me? Thinking all this through at the start is really going to help you to create a show that's going to have longevity. What's your podcast frequency? It doesn't have to be weekly. It just has to be consistent. So how often are you thinking of producing content? Some of the great shows that get, millions of downloads, literally every episode, happen monthly. So as long as your audience fall into the rhythm of Mike shares an episode on the first Tuesday of every month, you just need to show up with a new episode on the first Tuesday of every month. That's what your audience is getting used to. So if you say you're going to put something out weekly, something's got to come out every week. And I can't tell you the number of times that we were sitting up until, 11, 12 at night to get a show edited and produced to have it ready to go to air the next morning, because I had committed my audience that I would be showing up every week. So think about, what's your strategy? How often can you show up? Because again, as entrepreneurs, we typically have more than one thing going on. So we want to make sure that this is going to be something that we can do long term. Okay. We're not setting ourselves up for failure. We're not setting ourselves up to sit up at 3 o'clock in the morning because, oh my gosh, we promised people that we would have an episode out, but the admin's due and we've got emails overloaded and client calls, etc. So think that through up front. How long do you want your show to be? Again, think about some of the shows that you listen to. I've got 60 minutes to science, or science in 60 seconds. Got a minute. They come in, they do a 60-second drop of a slight slither of information, and then they're out. What happens now is we have been converted to a streaming population. So if we become interested in a piece of content, think about your behavior with Netflix or any of the other streaming channels. If you go in for an episode and you're like, oh, this is good, there's a very good chance you just jump straight in and watch episode 2, episode 3, etc. So it's thinking about, do you want a shorter style show, or do you want to create something that's longer with a bit more meat to it? The average length of a podcast in Australia at the moment is 42 minutes. And when I kind of looked at that and thought that through, that's roughly the commute time for people in cities to get from, home to work. By the time they jump on the train, get themselves settled, get off, it's roughly a 45 minute commute for most people. So that 42 to 45 minutes is kind of right now the sweet spot. When I started podcasting, it was much, much longer. It was well over 60 minutes. So it's shortening. So think about, how long do you want your show to be? And again, bring it back to your ideal audience. If you're talking to, say, new mums, what do you think the chances are that they've got 45 minutes up their sleeve when they've got, a new bub crying? Maybe you want to do something that's 5 or 10 minutes that they can listen to with, headphones in while bub's up at 3 a.m. in the morning. Just think your audience through, think the listener journey through. Folks, at any time you've got questions, pop them into the chat box. Love to answer them along the way. We'll make sure that we've got a bit of time for Q&A at the end, but definitely just dump anything that you're thinking of into the chat box. Just love to make sure that you're not falling asleep on me, because it's, kind of prime sugar crash in the afternoon. So stay with me. All right. So that's kind of the foundations, right? That's the stuff that we really need to think through. That's the brain work that we've got to have done before we get to the good stuff, right? So most people think podcasting is just grabbing a microphone, sitting down, hitting record and having a chat. If you want your podcast to be successful, if you want it to have legs, if you want it to have longevity, then put that strategy and that pre-work in up front, and it will serve you right throughout the rest of the things that you're going to do with your podcast. All right, so here's what you need to physically have equipment wise before you kick off. So the first one is a decent microphone. Okay, I am not big on spending money on anything until I've proven that it is going to work for me and for my business. A good podcast is work. Okay, it is going to take time. It does take commitment. So before you go out and spend, thousands of bucks on a equalizing deck or, any of that kind of stuff, just all I want you to do is buy yourself a decent mic. Now, by a decent mic, I'm not sure if you can see this. I'm going to hold it up. At the moment, I'm using a USB Rode mic on the Black Friday sales. The cheapest I've seen them is $129. So, Google Black Friday sales USB mics and you'll find a ton of them. I also have a bunch of other mics, that I use depending on what it is that I've got going on and where I plan on recording. Okay, so I've got my little handheld mics that I use if I'm out and about. So if I'm recording on the fly or on the run, I've got a little journalist kind of mic. If I'm doing a Zoom recording, I'll use this or I'll use my studio mic. But get yourself a decent mic. So somewhere between 120 to 200 bucks is going to pull you up for a decent mic. If you use PC, the Rode is awesome. Blue Yetis are also still very popular. And if you are Apple, again, same thing, Blue Yeti or the Rode mics are fantastic as well. If you are going to be interviewing someone, think through what sort of microphone they're going to be using as well. The next one is soundproofing. So this photo is exactly the soundproofing I had. This was my office when I first started my very first show, which was not the panel one. It was a show called, and get this, the Ex-Corporate Hippie's Guide to Wellness. So lesson there, watch the length of your podcast show title, because that was a bit of a, anyway, didn't last long. But all that is there is a couple of outdoor cushions, okay, from my outdoor setting. And I just set it up around me and one over the top, and I would speak into the cushions. Dampens the sound, gets rid of all of that background noise, really. And it depends on where you're recording. If you are in a empty room, you're going to have a lot more kind of reverberation going on. So the best place to record is a room with carpet, or go and sit in a cupboard, or create a pillow fort. You want to dampen the sound, because again, remember, the only way your listeners have to judge your show is on the audio. So if it's a horrible scratchy sound, or there's a lot of echo, or it sounds like you're recording in an empty room, that's a bad experience for your listeners. So think that through. Doesn't have to be anything expensive. You don't have to go to a recording studio. Just set yourself up with some pillows or some cushions, and there you go. You're good to go. The next one is a pop filter. Now, I have one in front of my mic which you can probably see there. And what the pop filter does is, if you are somebody who pronounces your P's with purpose, then that can be a little disconcerting for your listeners. And the pop filter will just disperse that noise for your listeners. So cheap as chips, an extra probably $20 in, when you buy your microphone. It'll just sit. If you buy the Rode that I have, it comes with it. So you're good to go. So Peter's question, what about dogs and kids in the background? Feed the dogs, put the kids outside is my thing. I do use a bit of software called Crisp, KRISP, and it is a noise cancelling software that sits over the top. So if you're using Zoom as an example to record, or Zencaster, which I'll talk about shortly, you can run Crisp over the top and it dulls the noise down. So KRISP, great bit of software. It's a freemium model, meaning it starts free and it goes into a paid facility depending on how much you need to use it. Great question, Peter. All right. Also good for, when you're just doing Zoom calls, really, really handy. All right. The next one is a wind sock. And that's that thing that you can see over the mic there. I have one that I call the Donald because it just kind of looks like it's got a big comb over, sits on top of my outdoor mic. Now, the only time you're going to need a windsock is if you are recording outside. Now, you might think, oh, it's only a little breeze, it's fine. You'll be surprised. Think about when you're on a phone call with a friend and you're just out walking and your friend says to you, wow, where are you? Like, that's crazy. Microphones do pick up those wind noises very easily. So if you are planning on, recording when you're going for a run or cycling, I've got a client that does his podcast recording on his bike, and that's the whole kind of, thought behind the podcast is he does it while he's on one of his rides, and he definitely has to have a windsock on his little lapel mic that we've got him. So again, cheap as chips, like $5, $8, and it's just something that you pop over the top of the microphone and it just gets rid of that background wind noise for you. All right, throw your questions in, folks. I want to make sure that we're covering everything off. Like I said, I've been doing this for like 10 years. So anything you want to know about podcasting, chuck it in there. Happy to talk about it as it comes up, and make sure that we cover off everything that you want to know today. All right, let's talk about recording options. So there's a few ways and a few things that you can think about when you are recording your show. A really popular medium now is to just use Zoom. Okay. When you use Zoom, even on the free version, if you go into your settings, and you might have to Google it to find it, but if you Google 2-channel setting for Zoom, what it will do is it will record your guest on one channel and you on the other. So then when it comes to editing your show, it is much, much easier for you to make nice, clear cuts that pulls the show together in a nice, clean way. So Zoom have 2-channel recordings. You can use Microsoft Teams. I love a program called Zencaster. So Zencastr, Zencaster. And it is audio only, okay? So the nice thing about recording via Zoom is you can see the person that you're talking to or the people that you are talking to. Zencaster is audio only, but again, will record everybody that you speak to on a different channel. So when it comes to the editing side of things, you get 3 separate channels that the editor can pull apart, and it makes it really nice and easy for them to edit, or for you to edit if you're going to be doing that yourself. So that's your recording options. Of course, you can also, just grab your phone and open up voice memos. It doesn't have to be anything too major. If it's just you dropping some thoughts into a recording device, then that is perfect. The voice memos on our phones do a great job now. It doesn't have to be anything more elaborate than that. All right, editing. Editing is the single biggest part of the podcast. So Debbie's just said, do you really need to edit if you want to be authentic? Depends on your audience, Deb. So here's the thing. As a podcast listener and as someone who has been listening to shows since they were RSS feeds, I cannot stand, and I want you to think about this from your own listening experience as I say this, I cannot stand a show when I jump on and I start listening and the first 5 or 10 minutes is them waffling on about the weather or what they got up to on the weekend or any of that kind of stuff. I'm not there for that superfluous conversation. I'm there for the problem that podcast is solving for me. Okay, I'm not interested in any of that external erroneous conversation. I just want the content that I'm there for. So if your audience is content driven and just like nuggets, absolutely you need to edit because you don't want to be wasting your listeners' time. They will drop out very quickly. Most podcast listeners, if it's a new show, they will give you about 2 to 3 minutes. And that's where they make the judgment call. Do they keep listening or are they gone? Okay. Beyond that, we are a critical bunch and we are quick to hit, I'm gone, quicker than doing that because there are so many new shows coming out week on week on week that I can find something new like that. You need to keep my attention. The other thing about editing is often, and this is particularly true when you are talking or doing an interview style or a chat style show, your guest can go a little bit off topic sometimes, or they may have a verbal tick. Okay, we all have verbal ticks. Mine is so when I'm thinking something through and I don't want to create any gap in the sound or in the noise, I will come in and I'll go, so, and then I'll say what I'm going to say. So when it comes to editing, I can get rid of all of that. So it makes the podcast again flow nice and have a nice flow to it. And the conversation continues in the direction that it needs to go. Again, a lot of our guests, particularly if you catch them with a question that they maybe weren't expecting, or listen to politicians, they're exceptionally good at this. They have an agenda that they want to drive home, and they will start by, well, Debbie, that's a really good question. But before I answer that, let me go on to this and let me just say, we hear that all the time with politicians. So if we're editing, we can cut all that stuff out because our audience doesn't care about, let me just say. They want to know the question that you've asked them. So we can really tighten that whole episode up because remember, it's about our listener. What problems are we solving and what is the style that we want to get across? So yes, editing is critical when it comes to creating a good podcast. And the other thing I'll say on editing is your podcast is a representation of your brand. Okay. So thinking through what your own business brand stands for will tell you whether or not you need to edit the show. Okay. So when I was doing I was thinking that through. When I was doing Not Another Business Show, that was all about positioning me as the expert in creating podcasting for small business owners. So I wanted to make sure that everything had purpose. The episode stayed on track. It was tight. It was full of gold nuggets and it was content driven. So it was a true representation of the brand of that business at the time. So thinking that through, Dennis is just saying, agree, editing is critical. And it's one of the big things, interestingly, as a judge for the Podcast Awards, it's one of the big things that we mark down on is that lack of editing, because that shows almost a disrespect for your audience. If you're prepared to live in ums and ahs and, waffling conversation, that tells me that you haven't really put the strategy into the show and thought that through. Hope that helps, Debbie. I'm a big believer in editing. All right, theme music. This makes or breaks your show, okay? First of all, you need it to be copyright or royalty free. So please don't just jump onto Spotify and find your favorite track and download it. That's going to get you in a world of pain. In the downloadable that I'll show you at the end that I've got for you if you're interested, I've got, where you find the music, but essentially Google royalty-free music. I use a platform called Audio Jungle, and you can buy music. So what I'm looking for when I purchase a piece of music is I want something that is long enough, so probably 2 to 3 minutes, that I can pull different parts out of the music. So I can have something that's going to be an opener, something that can be a bridge if I want to add sponsors into a show, or if I want to change from one part of the podcast to another and I want to create a delineation between, here's this bit and now we're moving to this bit, and I want an ending. So I'm looking for different parts in the music, and I'm looking for something with variation. I typically don't use music with vocals to it. I just want an instrumental. But again, I'm thinking about my listener. I'm thinking about the purpose of the podcast, and I'm thinking about what does the music say about the show. Again, if you want to be a podcaster, you've got to listen to podcasts. So go back and listen to some of your shows after this, thinking through now, listening to the theme music, listening to the editing, thinking about how those shows are structured, and you'll start to hear some of this stuff. So it's thinking through, if you're doing a show on, Andrew Denton did a great one on the euthanasia debate, the right to die in Australia. Now, can you imagine if he had led that show with some upbeat kind of funky music, right? It would just, our minds would go, there's a real disconnect there. So thinking through the content of the show, thinking through the audience, and then find the piece of music to match the feeling that you want people to get from listening to your show. All right. Y'all are very quiet. So if you've got questions, slam them in. We've got, 20 minutes to go. Really, really happy to just jump in and answer everything as we go. Gives me a chance to have a drink of water or two at the same time. If you want to help a sister out, that would be lovely. All right. So the next thing is a voiceover. We call this the hero intro. Now, have you ever been to a comedy show, or even if you go and see a band, what's the chances that you reckon that Kitty Flanagan is going to walk out at the start and go, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a great act for you tonight. This lady's been a long-time comedian in the Australian market. She's done ABC TV. She's written books. She's a funny, funny lady. I want to welcome you, Kitty Flanagan, to the stage. And then Kitty goes, g'day. So it's her doing her own intro, and then it's her starting the act. It rarely happens. Okay. So there's this thing we call the hero intro, and it's getting someone else to read your introduction to you. And it could be as simple as you're listening to Not Another Business Show with your host, Tracy, Sheen, the digital guide. That could be it. That might be as much of an intro as you want, but get somebody else to read it for you. Now, if you are a male that's going to host the show, my suggestion is get a female. If you're a female, get a male. Why? Because we want to break up that patterning and cause our listeners' brains to stop and listen in. So every time we create a delineation, whether it's by voice, by music, whatever that is, it causes a moment with our listener to check back in, because we might have droned out. So it stops and we check back in with what's going on. So you can use things like Fiverr, plenty of, even if you've got a mate that's got a good voice, make sure that they don't, have I don't know, a really nasally, but when people don't sound great. So you want to make sure, again, that the person that you are using is on topic, on point, on brand for the show that you are creating. And when I found out Not Another Business Show was going really, really well in the States, I ended up getting a male American guy to record the voiceover for me. So again, the Americans were comfortable because the intro was done by an American, and then they love the Aussie accent that went on afterwards. So again, thinking that through. So Dennis just says here, follow-up point on editing, only edit a copy of the master copy. That's a great point, Dennis. Thank you so much. So one of the things I talk about in the downloadable that you get is thinking through where are you going to store all of your content once you've recorded it. And yes, you want to make sure that you're making copies. So thank you, Dennis. That's a really, really, really good point. All right, cover art. Again, this is another thing that we kind of, as podcast listeners, we probably just kind of flick through, but I want you to go back again, or even while you're on the call, open up your podcast app and just take a look at what stops you scrolling, okay? There are 2 million plus episodes or shows out there, 48 plus million episodes out there. What stops you scrolling when you open podcasts or Google Play or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from? What stops you scrolling? Think about your cover art, okay? Think about how it's going to look as a thumbnail on the phone. Don't fill it up with text. Make sure that everything is easy to read. Make sure you've got a good image if that's what you're going to use, but think that bit through, because cover art is the thing when millions of people globally have no idea who Jason is or who Joy is. It's the thing, the cover art is the first thing that stops them scrolling and goes, that's interesting. What's that about? Then they'll open it up, they'll read the little blurb, and maybe from there, they'll give you a couple of minutes of their time to see what that's about. In the downloadable, I give you the dimensions that you need for iTunes and Google Play as well, because that's something that you can create in Canva. Show notes. Now, these are really critical. A lot of effort should, in my opinion, be put into our show notes and into the repurposing. A podcast is marketing gold. You will get so many other bits of content from each podcast episode that you put out, but you've got to think about how are you going to attract a new audience. And remember, we just talked about the first thing they're going to see if they don't know who Mike is. First thing that's going to stop them is the scroll of the cover art. The next thing that's going to happen is they're going to open it up and they're going to read the initial blurb. This show is about blah, blah, blah. How are you going to hook them? Okay. Think that through, and think that through for each of the episodes. That's what's called your show notes. Okay. So when you write up your episode content at the end of each episode, think through how would you hook a person if they've never heard your show before, and this is the episode they're coming into. So treat each episode like gold and put the time and energy in to creating content, the show notes, the written words that are going to help you. The podcasts that do the best in terms of downloads and longevity, if you take a look, are the ones with often quite long show notes. They might have links out to the guest's website. They might have, here's where you can go and get their book. They've got an upcoming retreat. Here's a link to another podcast that we talked about during that podcast. So they will link through and make sure that it's easy for the listener to consume more content, whether that's more podcast episodes, go to the website, watch it, read a blog, watch a video, whatever. So think that bit through. Transcription. So this is great from a Google point of view. Okay, you can use, and again, I'll give you a couple of examples in the downloadable, but there's software like Descript, Descript. You can use rev.com. There's a lot of transcription services, or you can pay someone to do it for you, where you just upload the audio file and it will give you a written version with timestamps if you want them. So at 2 minutes 32, Tracy said this. At 3 minutes 03, Dennis replied, blah, blah, blah. So it will timestamp it. So you can write that into the show notes then. If you want to hear where Dennis kicks in and talks about transcriptions, jump to 25:34 on the podcast. And again, if you're a big podcast listener, having those timestamps is just gold. So a transcription you can load directly to your website with the podcast episode, because you're going to embed the podcast on your website. We'll talk about that shortly. But the transcription is then read by Google. So now you're starting to be indexed and providing additional content and additional answers for your clients, your community, your audience, by just uploading a transcription. Also remembering that not everybody likes listening to audio. Weird, I know, because I love it, but we need to make sure that we're catering for all the members of our community. So some people still like to read. So having a transcription there is really, really helpful. All right, hosting. You need to host your podcast somewhere. It's like web hosting. So typically, some of the big ones are Libsyn, Libsyn. It's been around forever. There's a ton of them available. Essentially, what you want to do, though, is Apple iTunes, Google Play do not host the podcast. You need a host, and then it connects with iTunes. And anytime someone downloads or streams your podcast, it reaches into your hosting company and pulls the information and just streams it or downloads it from there. So then once you are hosting your podcast, that's where you grab the code and embed it on your website. So again, same thing. It's not slowing your website down. If somebody wants to listen or stream from your website, it's going to your podcast host and pulling the details from there. The only thing I'll say about hosting is make sure that you get someone that will give you analytics. You mightn't be interested in them now, but once you've been podcasting for a while, you're going to want to know, where's your audience coming from? Are they coming from Australia? Or like I found out was the majority of my listeners in the US, are you getting people from Azerbaijan? Like, where are they coming from? And it will give you more information as in what kind of a device. Are they listening all the way through? Are they downloading? Are they streaming? You want that information because it can help you tighten up your podcast as you go along the journey of podcasting. All right, repurposing. This is probably the most overlooked part of a podcast, in my opinion. As I said, a podcast is marketing gold. So when I'm helping a client create a podcast, we put the episode at the center of a mind map, and then we think about all of the stuff that we can pull out of it. So the first one we've already talked about, transcription. So if I've got an audio file and I've recorded it via Zoom, can I release the video on YouTube? And now I have a video. Can I cut it down? And now I've got social media. Can I pull some quotes out of there of my guests? And now I've got quotes that I can use on my social media or in a blog. Can I create a downloadable opt-in, like a template or a checklist, or what else can I create? So don't be creating new content over and over and over again. Repurpose the hell out of your podcast episodes, and you'll find it's on the third time that you share an episode that you will get the most traffic and the most downloads and listens. I don't know why that is. It has been true for 10 years and it is still true today. The third time that you share. So just because you put an episode out this week, don't think that it's dead and buried. Maybe in a month, maybe in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, depends if it's evergreen or if it's current. Reshare the episode again and again and again. And it's on that third time that you'll pick up the most listens to it. All right, 10 minutes to go. Let's get through the last of these slides. Start popping your questions in the chat box for anything that you want to know. Promotion, once your show goes out or once you're ready to launch, how are you going to tell people that it's around? I'm a big fan of marketing without money where I can. So who are my partners? Who has my clients before or after me that aren't in competition? So for example, if I was working with an accountant and they deal in small business, I'd be looking for business coaches, for solicitors, perhaps for, I don't know, you get the idea of who else. Maybe local banks, maybe, chambers of commerce, other people that have my clients that aren't in competition with me. And I'd be looking for ways to say, hey, we've just put this new episode out. It answers this specific question that I think your audience would be interested in hearing. Would you like to share it? You may want to offer them a spot on your show. Maybe one of the things you want to do is look for the people in your community who already have a reasonable following themselves. So Dennis, to your point of creating something for the seniors around Port Macquarie, maybe the mayor, maybe someone or a former mayor who's already got a profile, who's already got people that follow them, that listen to them, that are interested in what they have to say. Maybe they're someone that you want to have on the show to begin with, because you're going to get your guests to share the content as well. And then, you're going to expand the reach of your own show by making sure it's in front of the right people. So thinking through that promotional aspect, and then what else do you want to do? Do you want to run some Google ads, some Facebook ads? Again, thinking that through, and that comes back to your strategy. What are you creating the podcast for? If it's to build credibility, to build a network, to build community, to sell stuff, then it may be worth throwing some dollars at it and doing some ads off the back of it to build an audience. All right, so let's go back through everything again, because we've covered a lot of stuff, and we've kind of, we haven't even really gone live with the podcast yet, right? We've talked about everything that we kind of need to have our ducks in a row to make sure that everything is ready to roll. So we're setting ourselves up for the best chance of success. So our big considerations are things like, why do we want a podcast? What are you doing this for in the first place? What's your strategy? What's your ideal listener? What type of podcast are you creating? Is it you down the microphone? Is it you with a guest? Is it you with a few people? What problem or problems is your podcast going to solve? How often are you going to be podcasting? Weekly, fortnightly, monthly, bi-monthly? What does that look like? And is it ongoing or is it episodic? So again, thinking through the changes in listening habits. If you're a podcast listener, you'll know now that a lot of podcasts are just, this is a 6-part show, this is a 12-part show, this is a 10-part show. Hedley Thomas, the teacher's pet, and most recently the teacher's trial. He also did Shandy's story. So he's a journalist with the Australian, I think. Great podcast, really, really meaty, fantastic podcast, true crime kind of stuff. But he is very clear up front, this is going to be a 10-part episode where we're going to dive into the story of Shandy, how she, lost her life, and why the person has not been brought to justice yet or whatever. So we know right from the get-go that we're in this for 10 episodes and then we're out. Then we can go and find something else, because we all have short attention spans now. And if you are starting out in podcasting, if you've never done a podcast before, my biggest piece of advice for you would be to say, create a season, and just say right at the start, this is going to be a 3-part, a 6-part, a 5-part, whatever you decide is the right number for you. Based on the problem that you want to solve, you can map that through. Episode 1, we'll talk about this, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Because that gives you an out. Okay. If you start the podcasting journey and you go, man, this is a whole lot harder than what I thought it was going to be. It's taking a whole lot more time. I'm not really enjoying this, whatever, you've only got 4 episodes, 6 episodes, 8 episodes to do. If you create this never-ending story from the get-go, much harder for you to escape once you start it. So think about just starting with the season and saying, you know, hey, this one's got 6 episodes. Did a great launch with a gin distiller a few years ago off the back of his book. The show is called Still Magic, and we did exactly that. We recorded a bunch of episodes. We launched 4 or 5 at once. The reason for that is, remember, we binge now. So we wanted to make sure that when one person listened to an episode, they had a couple to listen to so they could subscribe and get a few runs on the board. So it would give us a number of downloads, and it would help us get into the new and noteworthy on Apple iTunes, because there's a few things that they look for, and the number of downloads and subscribers is one of them. And then he was done by, I think, 12 episodes, but now he's gone on to do other seasons because he realized that he actually loves doing it. So what we'll need, decent microphone. That's it. Think through, where are you going to record? Is it going to be, you know, in an office, at your home? Is it a Zoom call? Are you out on the road? Are you going to be riding your bike? If you're out and about, do you need a pop filter? Do you need a windsock? But just thinking that through. And the other bits and pieces are things like recording options, editing your podcast. Remember, it's a reflection on your brand, your theme music, your voiceover, your cover art, the show notes, your hosting, repurposing, and promotion. So my challenge for you is this. If you are interested in creating a podcast, I would love you to go back to that first, and you're going to get a copy of the recording. You're going to go back to that strategy piece and just work on that. Just think through, what sort of show do I want? Who are my clients? And let me show you the download that you can get that will help you with that. I'm just going to hit stop share for a second and bring it up. And share screen. Okay, so this is the 14-pager that I've done for you. So this is everything we talked about. So Zencaster, getting your recording space ready, finding your artwork, getting your music, getting that hero intro, file management, and we talked timeframes. When do you need to do this? Editing, selecting your hosts, getting your website connected, connecting it to iTunes, getting it on Google Play, setting up regular recording times, submitting recordings to an editor if you're going to use them, all the information on the equipment, Zencaster, website, audio hosting, cover art, all of the sizing and things that you need, the music, the voiceovers, everything is there for you, including an example execution time frame. So thinking down from the day that you want to launch, working backwards, what would that look like? So that will be available for you to download with the recording if you're interested. And I want you to go back to that strategy piece and just start to think that through. All right, let's take some questions with the last couple of minutes to go. So Peter asks, transcription, did you talk about apps that can help me to transcribe? I cut out for a bit. So transcription, Peter, I used Descript, so Descript. It's a freemium model, so starts free, and then depending on how much you need to use it, goes into a paid version. The reason I like that is it's really kind of cool. Once it's created a transcript for you, not only can you edit it, but you can cut out words and it will edit the audio for you as well, right? So really cool bit of tech now that you can say, you know, the podcast, the transcription says, not sure what you meant by that. So I can just put my cursor at the end of what, not sure what you meant by that, and hit delete to the start of the and it's going to delete that out of the audio as well. So I love Descript. Rev is also another really popular option. I used a transcriber, a human transcriber that was costing me about $15-20 an hour. They're reasonably quick. The efficiency in terms of spell check and things is there as well. So Debbie just said, thank you, Tracy. It was great. I have to go for a meeting. Have a great rest of your week. You too, Deb. Take care. Folks, any other questions? Otherwise, we are kind of bang on time. Happy to answer anything else that you have. Who is thinking about starting their own podcast? That's what I'm kind of really interested in. I know Dennis is. Who else on here is interested? So Joy, yep. Perfect. I know Peter's done some podcasting before. I know Debbie's been thinking about it. Excellent. All right. So this recording will be available. Give me a few days because we've had a lot of stuff go on this week. We've still got a few webinars to go for the rest of Entrepreneur Fest week. If you'd like to follow anything else that I do in the slides, my details are there, so you will be able to keep in touch. So here we go. And also you can follow me on the Entrepreneur page. So I'm with YEP in Ipswich. So if you Google yep.business, YEP, your entrepreneurship program, I'm the entrepreneurship facilitator for Ipswich. Love to have a chat. You can follow all of our events, tune into anything we do. I do a lot of online content that's free across the year. So you're welcome to tune into all of that as well. All right, folks, stay tuned for the recording. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Joy. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Lovely to see your smiling, well, I can't say smiling faces, but your smiling names on the screen. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you for spending an hour with me, and hopefully I will see you in another webinar room around at some point. Take care. See ya.